So starting with our top 10 modern muscle cars, at number 10 is going to be the Dodge Viper. So as we noted, we are dating back to 2000, everything from 2000 newer. The Gen 4 Vipers were produced 2008, 2009, and 2010. It was the last year, believe it or not, that Dodge made the Viper. Yes, in the Gen 5s, they are Dodge Vipers, but it was actually bought by Fiat. I do think that's going to matter in time here for Mopar collectors, Viper collectors, where you still have the last Viper that was made. It's a whole different price tier than where the Gen 5s are at, especially when you're talking ACRs, ACR Extremes, and that. These cars kind of been hovering somewhere, depending on miles and options, between 85 to a $115, $120, most of those being ACRs. So for that price point, I do think the return on investment for these cars for the long haul are going to be a very, very healthy car to kind of invest in here. Naturally aspirated, 600 horsepower, 560 foot-pounds of torque, no supercharger in these cars. It reminds me a lot of the Cobras when you sit in them. Not a lot of space, really a raw driver car, but cracking the top 10, the 08 through 2010 Dodge Vipers Gen 4s are a car I really, strongly believe in. Number 9 on our countdown for the top 10 modern muscle cars is the Gen 5 Z28 Camaros, a car that I feel is extremely slept on. 1,801 total units produced for a 2-year run from 2014 and 2015. 1,292 were produced in 2015, 509 produced in 2014. You have the LS7 naturally aspirated engine with 505 horsepower, 481 pounds of torque. You have the Brembo ceramic brakes, probably and likely your last naturally aspirated Camaro, especially with the manual transmission. At the time, it had the widest front tires on a car ever produced, and really was the peak for the Camaros in a lot of ways. 300 pounds less than the ZL1s in terms of overall weight. A lot of the technology was from the Formula One race cars. So Chevy really did its due diligence in the production of this car. MSRPs were at the highest $75,000, and these cars can be bought for under $100,000. And I think, at that price point for the long haul, being everything that is the history of the Camaro and all the technology that they used to get this car in a 2-year run, it is a solid investment and something you really don't hear much about in terms of the collector car market, the Z28 Camaro. So coming in at number 8 on our countdown is the C6 ZR1. So these cars were produced starting in 2009 and ended in 2013. Body lines on these cars are some of my favorite on any Corvette. You have the chrome wheels, which I think are one of the best sets of wheels that you can get on any car, even to date. You have the carbon fiber hood, carbon fiber roof panel that peek through on the hood to see the LS9 underneath with 638 horsepower, 604 pounds of torque, 200-mile-an-hour car. And I think we kind of lose sight on how special this car is and what eventually led us now to the C7 ZR1 platform and eventually even the C8 platform for the ZR1. It really was a supercar of its time. Mind-blowing, really. What it was able to do with the technology of this time frame. You're looking at least 10 years ago, all the way up until 14 years. 638 horsepower, 604 pounds of torque. The C6 ZR1, when you start comparing it to the prices of the C7 ZR1s, it's a bargain. Even cars, in that price range now, you can buy these cars typically somewhere between 80 to 100, a little bit more if they're delivery mile cars, but really a truly special car is the C6 ZR1 and a good investment. So coming in at number 7 on our countdown is the Shelby GT350R. Production on these cars started in 2015 and ended in 2020. 2015, only 37 of these cars were made, paying respect to the cars of 1965. 2020 was the last year. I would rate these cars 2015 as number 1, 2020 if you can get a Heritage number 2, and then any other 2020 model. The 16s, 17, 18, 19s, all nice cars as well, but in terms of collector grade, 15s, Heritage, and then any other 2020 model. What's special about these cars are they're all naturally aspirated, 526 horsepower with that Voodoo flat plane crank engine. They moved to the Gen 2 motor in 2019. The sound of these cars are incredible. They redline over 8,000 RPMs. Many of you have heard these cars already, but if you haven't, do yourself a favor, do a little YouTube or Google search, find a video where you hear these cars. It is unbelievable, especially when you open up the exhaust to track mode. Carbon fiber wheels, carbon fiber spoiler, really the last of its kind now that we're moving into a new era of cars. GT500s were on people's radar, but really, if you're looking at modern Mustangs, I think the GT350R is going to be at the top of that list, and rightfully so. Coming in at number 6 on our countdown is the Shelby GT500 Supersnake. So the model year started in 2007 and ended in 2014, and that's the range we like to stay in because those cars were built on a GT500 body. Afterwards, in 2015, they still make the Supersnakes to this day, but they were built on the GT premium body. So not only that, but Carroll's influence were all over these cars from 07 to 14. He passed in 2012, but still had his DNA in the 13 and 14s, which are arguably the best Supersnakes to get. People love the aesthetics of them, but most importantly, the window stickers were higher because you had the 5.8 liter engine, 662 horsepower. You're looking at an extra $20,000 to $25,000 from 07 to 13 and 14 on just the increase in price for the GT500s. So, conclusion of the program was 2021 for Supersnakes, which a lot of people don't understand or realize. You were always able to buy a GT500, send it back to the different locations for Shelby to upgrade the car. So it took some time for these cars to take a leap, but we've seen that in the last few years here. They were only supposed to make 500 for every year, never came close to that. The top dog, definitely the 13, 14s, only 180 of those cars were built, 60 of which were wide bodies, as you see here. If you can find one with the whole shot, that is your true unicorn and one that you see here. So coming in at number 5 on our countdown, we're going to take a lot of heat for this, I know it. It's going to be a surprise to a lot of our following, but the C8 Z06. Now you got to listen here, specifically the 23 model year that is equipped with the Z07 package. Reason being that you cannot order this car right now with the restraints. Even if you are moving towards a model year for the 24s, they can't promise that you can get this option. Not going to matter. The 23 is going to be the car to have. It is going to be one of the rarest Corvettes that were ever produced. You need a C8 Z06 equipped with the Z07 package. Now, also the carbon fiber wheels, not carbon flash painted. You want the carbon visible wheels. Same thing with the Aero. It's got to be the exposed carbon fiber that you can see, not the painted flash. If you can get a car that has 2 of those 3 options, Z07 is a must. But then if you can get one with the exposed visible carbon fiber wheels, I would put number 2. If you had to settle for the wing and the Aero, these cars are going to be so rare. I'm telling you, in time, this car could potentially hit the top 2 on our countdown with how little these cars are going to be made, especially convertibles. Number 4 on our countdown is the 2018 Dodge Demon. So it was a 1-year run on production, 2018 being the lone year for that. 3,300 of these Demons were produced. Really, I mean, just unbelievable what Dodge was able to do with this car, and such a perfect name, the Dodge Demon. 808 horsepower under the hood with that 6.2 liter V8 engine, and it is so Mopar and Dodge like to push the limits on everything. And did they do this on this car? Unbelievable that it is street legal. You have factory drag racing suspension. You have that wide grabber air scoop. These cars continue to climb. I mean, now they're pushing over 200 grand pretty consistently at the auction, especially the low mile cars in the crate. Harder to come by, especially the ones that are low miles. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that even if these cars have around 100 miles, we don't know how those miles were, especially when these cars are really built for quarter miles at a time. Definitely never going to see anything quite like this again as we start moving forward into the era of the electric cars. I know we have a lot of the last calls, Black Ghost, things like that, but the Dodge Demon, definitely one of Dodge's best cars, not the best car, because we'll see what that is in our top three. Coming in at number 3 on our countdown is the Ford GT 2005 and 2006 model years. You had a 2-year run. Unbelievable cars. It was designed actually in secret. They nicknamed it the Petunia to kind of keep all the details in-house without leaking some of the information. Some really cool features on the Ford GT, just to name a few. The Roush designed supercharged dual overhead cam engine, the V8 producing 550 horsepower, 500 pounds of torque. Saleen was actually responsible for all of the suspension. At the time, it was independent wishbone suspension. You had an aluminum space frame chassis. Just unbelievable cars. The only reason why we did not put the Ford GT in the top 2, when you get down to the nitty-gritty, the only thing that's kind of holding these cars back from having the top spot is the production on these cars. You had 4,000 of these units built, and it seems that they are, readily available at auction or online when you are looking for one. And the top 2 choices that you guys will see here in the coming days are a lot rarer than the Ford GT and a lot newer than the Ford GT. So this car already 16 to 17 years old and has had a big lead on the cars that are going to be in the top 2 in terms of collector grade investments. Coming in at number 2 on our countdown is the 2019 ZR1 Corvette. So it was the last year for the Corvette to have the front engine and to have an option for a manual transmission before moving to the C8 in 2020. Believe it or not, a lot of guys traded these cars in for the C8. Production was really low, 2,953 total units produced, but only 744 of those were manual transmission coupes and an additional 140 manual convertibles. The ZTK option is a must-have for collectors. That is the high-wing track pack. You had about 586 of those cars that were built with competition sport seats, give or take. 140 of the convertibles, about half of those were ZTKs, and somewhere in the 50s with the competition sport seats. Comp seats look great. It's a must for a lot of collectors as well. Those cars that are manual transmissions with competition sport seats and the ZTK continue to kind of separate themselves from the rest of the pack. The low mile automatics continue to do well, but these are a slam dunk, bulletproof, investment grade cars that I think are only going to continue to go up in value. Why we put those ahead of the Ford GT is the manual cars are a lot lower in production, 744 for coupes compared to 4,000 for the Ford GT, and you're only 3 years removed from production. So we have finally come to number 1 on our countdown, the 2016 and 2017 Dodge Viper ACR Extremes. They are nipping on the heels of those Ford GTs. We had some people wondering why the Ford GT wasn't number 1. We didn't put it at number 1 because it's 16 to 17 years old already. You had 4,000 of those cars produced. The 2016 and 2017 Dodge Viper ACRs were a little over 900, even less of those which were Extremes. The Extremes are definitely the top dog, the one to have, but even ones that are low mile ACRs are knocking on the door of 300 grand now. These Dodge Viper ACR Extremes, one just went down to Kissimmee. It was a Voodoo Special Edition. That did $412,000. We just had one that sold at Amelia Island that we saw reach $415,000 plus with 1,900 miles. So, where these cars have kind of climbed in just 6-7 years is outstanding. A lot of people, myself included, see these cars and view these cars as $1 million cars one day. 13 track records. It's the modern day Shelby Cobra in a lot of different ways. That 8.4 liter naturally aspirated engine, the Aero. I mean, we love our ZR1s, but you put these side by side, it dwarfs the ZR1s. A lot more track provenance in the ZR1s is why we put the Viper number 1.